Hello, everybody. This is Frogman. Welcome back to FTB Skies. Last time we messed around a little bit with that Astra, and we got to the moon with our very first little rocket, which is currently sitting up on top. I do believe I put it back where it needed to go at the end of last episode or in between. However, we're going to do a little bit of messing around with that. Eventually, I think a little bit more. We're going to actually have to sit down and probably harvest a whole bunch of stuff and build a couple of miners and go do a little bit more exploration, but kind of saving some of the exploration for when I just don't feel like playing and, doing the worst kind of things. So part of last time, and I'm just going to kind of fiddle with it right now because I think it was kind of funny. Part of last time is we right off the bat had what is a really amazing thing, I guess, once you get to that point where you gather this up. The everlasting guilty pool is an infinite source of mana that can be drawn from via, well, in just about any way that you can normally think of doing it, to include with the spark augmentation and spark things and stuff. So it can kind of do a few things for you. So I'm not going to use it downstairs because, if you put all that work into kind of generating things the way that you're generating things, and I think at this point we're probably pretty well done with it. But there is something we can do that's kind of fun with this, and I've actually used it in other packs a long time ago, or at least with various things, is you can make RF from it using a flux, flux thingy, whatever the heck they call these things, these two guys right here. So flux field, and I do not know why I'm on caps, but anyhow, a mana flux field basically takes leftover spare mana and turns it into RF. And then of course, because we have botanic additions here, there's an elven mana flux field that can be used to, it can accept spark augmentation, or I should say spark transfer, which means as fast as I can pull out of one of these things using sparks, I can cram mana into this and then create a lot of RF. So for those of you that have never used these, they're not really all that good. They're a really good trash can for mana. So like if you have the way too much mana, it's better to try to make it this way than it is to anything else. But again, it basically says right there, any mana bursts or mana in general is received by the flux field are converted into energy and set into any adjacent receptors. And if we back up to the elven one, which should be somewhere right there, basically, it says it allows one to attach a spark to the flux field, as well also improving its overall capacity. Now, I had to kind of re-record this, so we already kind of got a few things going, but they're not all that hard to craft. So if you just do this, it's basically, these are just dream rock, which again is a living rock that you toss into the elven trade. Mana flux field requires a rune of energy now instead of, I don't remember exactly what it was prior to that, which again, not impossible to craft. They take a fair amount of mana. I will say that this is quite a decent amount of mana to make it work. So yeah, it's one of those, you can kind of set it down. But essentially what we're going to do with this is something very simple, very easy, and we're going to make power with this free thing because you gave it to me. I'm not going to use it. I'm going to make sure we're using it. So we're going to do something kind of simple, kind of easy. And we're going to put about 12 of these down just because they make a nice little pretty pattern. And theoretically, I could then stack another set on top of this, and another stack on top of this, and another stack on top of this. But you want to make sure that your sparks have line of sight to wherever you need to go. So we're going to do, I guess we'll do something like that, and then I'm going to break this out, and we're going to attach a flux plug to this just to make sure that it doesn't have any problems. I could attach it here in the corner because there won't be any line of sight issues with the sparks, but essentially that's all we got to do. Plug is tied to a point that's on top of that thing, and well, all I should need to do now is just do this. So can I reach that plug from here? I can. Okay, so if we just put one right here and then go boink, 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 and well, that was everybody. Did I miss one? I think I'm short one. Hang on one second. I am short a spark. And the final one over here in the corner. Now it makes a nice, pretty little sparkly mess. And if you click down here on the bottom, we're doing 120 FE a tick. 120,000 FE a tick. Now, that pretty much, this 5 right here is this and the stuff up top. So these are not that hard to craft when you get to this point. That you know, that thing's just going to continuously do that, and it can continuously push out in every direction as fast as you want to. If you wanted to, again, you could just stack more on top of this or build a really pretty structure or do what you ever want to do. 120,000, that's pretty good for the moment. I think we'll let that roll, considering the fact that I still haven't managed to get this thing even remotely close to full. That'll help a little bit. So anyhow, I thought I saw that and I was like, I'm going to put that to use for now, and that's how we're going to do it. And I think we'll just kind of leave it alone and let it do what it needs to do. I mean, for that matter, I could put that down there with the Botania stuff, but this little corner is going to be kind of our light duty power generation, and it's going to be, well, probably that's the last time we're going to do anything that small. So let's go ahead and turn in some more quests. We did a couple of more things in between episodes, or at least I was setting them up at the end of last episode. We've got some more things we can dump off as far as this goes. So crystallized amber. This one was a kind of a pain in the tail because of the fact that they wanted us to make, well, a bunch of stuff. And I think I even got this on either a quest or I found it in a chest in the nether or something, whatever. But just a lot of cooking as far as things go. So cook the vegetable noodles again. This is another one of those recipes that if you make it in this mixing bowl, the heated mixing system with Create, you have to make sure these go in a specific fashion. So it screwed up and made cabbage rolls a couple of times because you have to have cabbage. If you start down here and you put this in, this and this and this and this and then this, then it will actually craft it correctly. So there's one thing I am noticing with Create is that the differentiation between it and the cooking or the farmer's delight mod, it's having a hard time. So you just make sure you follow the correct pattern. And if there's something in here that's interchangeable, like if you just take cabbage leaf and a carrot, you can make a cabbage roll, which doesn't help us at all. Anyhow, again, roast chicken, nothing major here. That's just a crafting recipe, and it just required a couple of things that we already kind of had laying around. So final thing that I did want to kind of talk about, or I should say the final two things, is these two guys, the flawless budding Certus quartz and the crystallized amber. Crystallized amber is not impossible to make, and actually it's one of those things we should have probably got onto fairly early. And you make it in a solidification chamber, and I made way too much of it, but whichever way, solidification chamber in the general, well, we just do this, R. If you do that on here, it's either going to require liquid magma or honey. And liquid magma is the magma blocks or magma creams, again, made in a melting chamber. And since I've got so much honey, I went ahead and just made it with the honey. But again, it's kind of one of those, whichever one of these is going to be easier for you to produce is where I would suggest you go. I went this way because I'm producing all this stuff. And again, a fire charge is just a simple handcraft. So we have plenty of those to turn in. I made way too much of them, apparently. So let's go ahead. What are you doing? Do that, and we'll grab all of those up, and we'll speak about these for a second. So recipe on you. You can find them in the nether, or you can craft them out of various shades of this particular block. So a in-world transformation, chip budding Certus quartz, a damaged budding Certus quartz, a chip budding Certus, blah, 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 all the way down to, if I can get it to do it, it's a somewhere down in this line is a Certus quartz block. So Certus quartz block. Where is it? This one right there. If you click on it and you say in-world transformation here, it will give you a damaged budded Certus quartz. So if you take a regular Certus quartz block, a charged Certus quartz, and you put it in some water, it will give you a damaged budding Certus quartz. Now, if you take that and you put it in, you can keep doing that. It'll get better. It'll get better. It'll get better. Or if you take the, where is it? Enrichment chamber, and you do something along these lines. Where the heck is it? I know I found this. I only had to do it once. Somewhere in here anyway, you just kind of slowly just cycle those blocks through an enrichment chamber over here until you get a flawless budding Certus quartz crystal block. It's not hard. It was just that initial thing that I'm pretty certain when I built it, it took the flawed, where is it? This very damaged one. I'm pretty sure I took this one and it went straight through that into some other thing like that ended up being a perfect one. I didn't have to sit there and continuously in-world change it. So let's go ahead and handle that stuff in, and then we can move on to the next one. So submit and submit and submit and submit and submit and submit. Thank you. I will take your creative motor. Amazing. Now, this is going to get set somewhere because, again, we have way more power than we need. And if we have to build a mobile machine, we'll use this. So we'll just put it down right over here, I suppose. And this was this was a thing for something else that I'm just going to put back there and ignore. It's full of creosote oil. What do I need creosote oil for? Well, I mean, there's things you can do with creosote oil, but go ahead, clean up your inventory. Let's put those away, put that away, and let's do the next one while we're at it, since we're standing here looking at it. So aluminum ingots and arcane sands. Go with the next one, which is arcane creatio. I need that and that, which I guess if we go over here and we just tell this to do that. So core, craftable, please, and 128 of those. Next, start, and next, start. We'll let those work while we kind of work on some of the next things. So, looking around at some of this other stuff. Runic Hell, we're going to be setting this one up probably maybe next time. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of hold off on these next two for a couple of minutes, or for at least an episode or two, because I want to start working on this. This is a pain. This is something we haven't been touching on, and I've been kind of avoiding messing with some of the stuff that has been going on with creating power because of the fact that we've really not needed it. Good. That's crawling up nicely, and I might just get bored and make another 12 of those just for giggles. Again, it's, what is that? Be 24 diamonds is the most expensive part about that whole mess. So, yeah, that was the worst part about that whole thing. So, we're going to have to keep watching these because they're going to just sit there and spin and do the things and the stuff. Anyhow, we need to start talking about, oh, good, that's already done. We're going to need to start talking about getting to plutonium pellet. We're going to need to be able to get plutonium. Plutonium we get by running nuclear waste through an isotopic centrifuge. Nuclear waste we get either through a wasted radioactive comb, which is an absolute pain in the butt to get to as far as I can tell, or we have to build a fission reactor, which means we then need to start making fissile fuel. Fissile fuel is going to be made via uranium hexafluoride, run through another isotopic centrifuge, which is hydrofluoric acid and uranium oxide. Uranium oxide, of course, yellow cake uranium. Yellow cake uranium is a uranium ingot in an enrichment chamber. Now, again, I've been kind of doing a little bit of behind-the-scenes grinding on that as well, and we should have a little bit of uranium. So it's kind of time to maybe start thinking terribly about one of the things that I think I don't want to do. How did we do? Are we done with both of them? Amazing. Give me my cores. Let's turn those in too. Thank you very much. I will continue on. That will give us a creative ME mana cell. Now the arcane sands, you can craft these via a salvaging table and any affix item. So any epic affix item. But for the most part, that's why I've been saving certain things, especially stuff down, all the weapons and all the armor and all the things that we were getting in the nether and wherever, because a lot of that was reasonably good. But also, if you just wander around, you'll eventually get enough of that stuff. Now, does that mean I have infinite mana? Because if I have infinite mana again, I can do that again. Does this go in here? Here, you can have infinite mana. What does that say? Oh my. We can have fun with that later, maybe. Anyhow, so let's start focusing. I know we've sitting there rattled and prattled once again, turning in a few things and doing some silly stuff. Like I can legit make that a heck of a lot worse. And if we automate the come on brain, the thing down there, the table, if we automate the runic altar, because we're going to need to, I can make those even faster, but we're not going to worry about it right now. I don't need that much more power. Maybe. I'm saying that now. Who the heck knows? We still have to do another, 100 billion? Something like that. But again, it's going to be a while from now. I want to start working on getting fission power and steam turbines going. So, in order to do that, we have to start talking about mechanism. Now, I would normally at this point go to fusion. I would normally go to fusion when I'm ready to start building things, but this has been blocked directly by the fact that you now have to create polonium. Again, polonium is made with nuclear waste. So if you want to build anything out of that stuff, you have to, or at least as far as I can tell, either come up with a wasted radioactive comb, which is Well, not really all that easy to do, because radioactive bees dying to radiation has a chance to turn them into wasted radioactive bees. Wasted radioactive bees don't pollinate on any flower. Instead, they absorb radiation from their surroundings, which means you have to, well, radiate or irradiate an area and then force bees to die in the area with hopes that they, do what they're supposed to do. So, sleep. You got bees that are supposed to be doing things. Anyhow, so that means we have to get into fission, which means we're going to have to play with something that would be similar to big reactors, but not quite. So let's look at all of this fun stuff. And this is actually a chapter in the book that we can definitely go ahead and look at. So I have to get all the way to here. Let's go get us a pressurized reaction chamber, a solar neutron activator, and start looking at all this fun stuff. We're going to need those anyway. Pressure... Thank you. One of those go. All right, there is a pressurized reaction chamber. That will help us get to the next step, which is this. So we can grab a couple of fluorite. Amazing. You can have this. And then the next step was going to be a solar neutron activator, which is going to require plastic. This was where I was worried about whether or not I was going to have to start doing some silly things in order to get to this stuff, because we're not currently making HDPE sheets. Why do we need solar neutron activators? Well, that's how you're going to take the nuclear waste and turn it into the polonium. That's where we need to go from that point. So, I guess what I need to do then is we're going to go ahead and set up a bunch of the fission stuff. Okay, let's do this the right way. We're going to push this the other direction so we can figure this out. We need to read these. So we'll start with big reactor, construct a fission reactor, which means reactor casing, reactor glass. That was the other thing I want. I know that's not complete glass. I did want some of this too, just because it does look really nice. What is this? Enriched iron? You know how to make enriched iron. Put those down there. Kind of filling up, about to have to set up another line of things, although some of this we can probably take out of there. Okay, let's read up on the rest of this stuff. So we'll have to make all those, turn those in a control rod assembly, which I haven't done that either. Now, I've done a little bit of playing with this in the test world, but let's go ahead and read this whole mess. Fission reactor is a multi-block that generates a massive amount of heat, as well as some other byproducts. Read the entire next 3 quests before starting it. The fission reactor is incredibly dangerous, and you may want to test in a creative world as well. We've added a ponder to teach you how to build the fission reactor. Either ponder on a fission reactor port or click here instead. So we're going to need to craft a reactor port, a control rod assembly, a fission fuel assembly, and a reactor glass. So we'll just go ahead and have it do those. Craft one of those. So this plus this plus this plus this is going to be getting us through to the next quest. That's not how you build one. That's just going to get us to the next quest. So radiation is just spicy air. Learn about radiation. This is where the fun part comes, and where I think probably big reactors failed very horribly, is the fact that you are now going to have to deal with radiation when it comes from certain things. So we're going to have to kind of play around with it. Basically what it is it's a radioactive waste is the part that's going to be the worst part about it, and we're going to have to kind of fool around with it. If you guys want to pause it, you can pause it and read this right here. Essentially, our biggest problem is going to be dealing with the radioactive waste and see how we're going to be able to do things. And the fact that once you build the majority of this structure, or should say for that matter, when you put down the radioactive waste storage barrels, you cannot move them. Because if you do, they dump their contents into the world. So that's what you take away from some of this stuff. Click again on there, and then we'll come over here. Learning how to use a fission reactor. It doesn't make power, it just makes heat. So it's essentially the same thing as a big reactor, extreme reactor, however you want to do it, as far as hooked up in steam mode. Now, there's a couple interesting things that we're going to have to fiddle with it, in that you can kind of adjust how it works, and they do a little bit more fun things. But the point is I kind of want what we would be calling a breeder reactor. I don't want an efficient one. I want one that makes waste that we can then process into other things that we can use other things. So I've already kind of played around with it. We'll have to do a few things. We just have to make sure that it doesn't explode. Famous last words. I know. Close. Can you... Out. All right. Turbine casing is the next part that we're going to have to do. So we need turbine casing, turbine valve, turbine vent. There's a bunch of little things that we're going to need. Plus we can make Geiger counters and dosimeters, and we can make hazmat gear. We'll get to that point here in a second, because the next thing I'm going to have to worry about is some of this other stuff. Now, I'm not really worried about it as far as things go. We're going to have to build a bunch of stuff. I'm going to have to figure out where I want to put this stuff, and we're going to have to decide the size we want. I don't necessarily need a monster, and the reason why I don't necessarily need a monster is that this is free. Pretty much all of this is free. Stuff like this is free. This is free. It's a little bit more fun. So what we're going to do is, again, we're going to try to build something that will create a reasonable amount of power for us, possibly, but also a reasonable amount of nuclear waste that we can then convert into other things. Now, again, nuclear waste, we can do a few things with nuclear waste besides turn it into plutonium. We can turn it into, again, polonium. Polonium you can then turn into polonium pellets with spent nuclear waste, or we can run this stuff through a supercritical phase shifting process. It requires an ungodly amount of power and will make antimatter. Antimatter we can then use as a way of converting other things into other things. Personally, this is one of those spots where whether or not this has been converted by the mod author or the mod pack author, or whether or not this is convertible through other means, would be a really fun way for a mod pack author to make very, very hard to get late game things. If you look in here, all of this is nonsense. Everything in here is nonsense. Simple, easy to obtain for the most part stuff. Absolute nonsense. But, you know, it is what it is. It's just the way it works. Of course, then we get the antimatter pellets that you can use to make drives and teleportation units and this kind of stuff, plus that and this. You know, it's kind of neat. Plus, we're going to have to make 5 of them at the end of it, so it is what it is. We're going to have to eventually do this for the last quest on the bottom down here. I believe it's this one. We have to make 5 of them, which means this is going to have to be kind of an overthought process. We're basically going to be taking all of the waste that's going to be coming out of this reactor and turning it either into plutonium pellets or polonium pellets or whatever. I don't know. So, yeah, I'm going to have to get a few things together, and then I think we're going to be building this thing in the nether. I'm not building it here. If it blows up, I'd rather it blow up in the nether than anywhere near our base. So let me get a bunch of junk together, and we'll see what we can't do about blowing ourselves up. Because then we have to make that. Alrighty, laid out a little bit of a place here, and you can just go away. We don't need you. You're not welcome. This should... All I want is a little bitty one, okay? I just want a little bitty one that's going to be nothing but just burning fuel for us, and we may or may not take the steam output that we get out of this and turn it into turbine power or whatever. Just depends. So I don't want a massive, gigantic thing, and I mean, there's plenty of tutorials online as far as how these things go. Again, we need a breeder reactor. We need a reactor to make parts for us so that we can eventually just shut it down and use something else. So 5x5 for right now, and then we're going to go ahead and place some of the internal parts. So what we're going to do is we're just going to build, like I said, a very, very, very simple one. I'm not in all interested in making this even remotely efficient. I want it to burn fuel reasonably quickly, and if we end up with a lot of steam, sure. Otherwise, I'm not going to trip on it. So the control rods again on top, and there we go, and there we go. Cool. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to say the face is over here. All right, so we'll put the glass on the front just so we can kind of look at it. It does have a neat little model, but it is, you know, what it is. So let's get this built up. This will be my first time on camera, but like second or third time fiddling with these things. I already blew one of them up in the test world just to see what it would do. It was fun. And I think I have enough stuff to do this. If not, we can always make more. Okay, I did make way too much, and I knew I was going to do that. That's fine. All right, so what we need to do then is we're going to start with the idea of where we want our reactor ports to be. And I think we're going to place in our water probably right there. I think sounds like a good idea. And we can start with a few sinks, of which we're going to do a little bit of goofiness with using the fluid pipes here. Now, I'm not going to do anything with them just yet because I did go ahead and make a couple of upgrades and I ended up with some stinking soul beads and some more junk that we don't need. It's fine. Let's see. Where is my wrench? Actually, I don't want to mess with this quite yet. Let's set this one or make sure we have it set, or we can just kind of leave it alone, whichever way. All right, so the fuel, I want to put the fuel in over here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do the waste. I guess we'll put the waste maybe right here and the steam right there. And then we can cover the front of this up with some reactor glass, just so that we can see the pretty that is the reactor once it's formed. All right. So we click on it. It's going to give us a button, shows us all the kinds of things that's going on. Now, again, like I said, what I want to do is I want the water in over here. So let me see, output waste, output coolant, input only. Yeah, input only and input only. And you're going to be output waste, and then you're going to be output coolant. Cool. All right. So then we can hook this up and get it to go doing what it needs to do. Where is my wrench? And we can get this thing starting to fill up. How did I do on placing it? Good enough. That'll do. That will do just fine. Awesome. So wrench, 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 wrench. And we're going to put gold, or not gold, diamond upgrades in all of these so that they're pumping as much as they can get in there at the point. We can make a slightly bit more if we need to, but I'm not really planning on it, given the fact that these pipes are actually really good at passing stuff once you start upgrading them. They're about the fastest pipes we get as far as it goes. So that should be filling that up reasonably decent. And I may have to do a little bit more, but we're going to let that fill all the way up before we even start thinking about doing anything else with it. That's it. So the next step we're going to have to do, I mean, I'm all honesty thinking about just taking the steam and running it right into a trash can. But then I know that if I run a turbine from it, we can then pass the steam back into, or the fluid that we get back into this and save on this little process. But for right now, yeah, we're going to fill it up and away we're going to go. So back to base. All right, so for the final little bit of today, we aren't going to fire it up, but we're going to go ahead and try to get most of this going. We do, like I said, I do have a trash can for right now. If we need to, we can just pump the stuff, I do believe, hopefully right straight into it. Our big problem now is we need to make the fissile fuel, which should be something along that line. So if I hit that there and we get rid of these, we need to produce this stuff. Well, this is produced in an isotopic centrifuge, so that means we're going to need to make an isotopic centrifuge. We're going to need uranium hydrofluoride. Hydrofluoride? Yeah, hexafluoride. Holy moly. Which is going to be made in a chemical infuser, which means we need to make hydrofluoric acid, which is going to be a chemical dissolution chamber, with sulfuric acid, which is going to be another chemical infuser, which is water vapor, and oh my goodness. This is where the fun stuff goes. This is where this all kind of gets silly just for this one little process. So we have to make, at least we can do that. I mean, chemical oxidizer. So I need a chemical oxidizer at least. Can I, that right there. Okay. Hit back. We need several of these. Several of those. And oxygen is going to come out of an electrolytic separator there. That. Sulfur dioxide, we already know we're going to need that for a chemical oxidizer. So those go into a chemical infuser. Sulfur trioxide is then used to make sulfuric acid with water vapor. Water vapor is rotary condensating what? Water? Okay, there's a whole lot of stuff I got to get together to build all this kind of thing, so let me knock out a bunch of these little machines, and then I will come back when we hook them up and make them work. There's an awful lot of steps for this one little thing. Oh, I love Mechanism and its massive stuff, especially now that decidedness actually kind of works. It's actually being reasonably simple as far as trying to get things laid out. So let's talk about the little process that is this ugly mess for the second while we kind of look at it. It's not completely totally on as we're trying to fill up a couple of things, but anyhow. The process for making fissile fuel, it's a gas. So understanding that, we need to end with an isotopic centrifuge. So when I plan these things out, generally what I'll do is I'll try to find the end thing that I need to work through and build it backwards. So we're going to start with that. The isotopic centrifuge is going to sit right there on top of all of this stuff. It's got a gas pipe that is connected to a chemical infuser. This chemical infuser is going to be the first step in the mass. Basically what that chemical infuser is doing is it's mixing uranium oxide with hydrofluoric acid to create uranium hexafluoride. Now, let's go this direction first. Uranium hydrofluoride or uranium oxide is not all that hard to make. Uranium oxide is just going to be yellow cake in a chemical oxidizer. Yellow cake is going to be an enrichment chamber with uranium ingots, and of course uranium ingots, you just get those by processing raw uranium. This stuff right here, the other thing, this thing right here. So what we're going to do here for now is we're going to run this stuff through an enrichment chamber right somewhere. Come on. Somewhere up here for now. Where is it? That one. We're just gonna do this one for right now because I've got about 1,000 uranium, so that'll get us an extra one of those things in here. So essentially there's your deal right there. This enrichment chamber is turning the uranium ingots into yellow cake. That yellow cake is then being sent through a chemical oxidizer to turn that into uranium oxidizer, and that is shoved into a chemical infuser. That's one side of it. The other side of it is going to be the hydrofluoric acid. So let's look at hydrofluoric acid. We got to tick all the way down here to here. Hydrofluoric acid is basically going to be fluorite with sulfuric acid. Now, in this little process right here, there's a thing that if you click on this button right here, it says item to gas. If you are absolutely swimming in sulfur dust, you can put sulfur dust in this little slot right here inside the chemical dissolution chamber, and it will use it incredibly quickly. And I mean incredibly quickly as far as to be able to make the sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid, it's better to be made in a chemical infuser doing this process here where we're taking water vapor and sulfur trioxide and mixing them together. Water vapor is just decondensating or turning water into water vapor using a rotary condensator. That's pretty simple, pretty easy. We'll look at that here in a second. Sulfur trioxide. It's another one of those things. It's a chemical infuser where you're mixing sulfur dioxide with oxygen. Oxygen is made in a electrolytic separator where you just take water again, you separate it into hydrogen and oxygen, you throw the hydrogen away. In here, we have sulfur dioxide. This is where it gets a little better. The sulfur dust here goes a lot further, so we're just taking another chemical oxidizer and taking sulfur dust and turning it into sulfur dioxide. And that is all happening over here. So right here is a sink that we're using to feed water into a rotary condensator. This is taking the water and turning it into water vapor. It is also plumbing water into this electrolytic separator where I have the hydrogen side set to dumping. I don't want any of the stuff. Then they're pointed with their correct outputs into the things next to them. So like say this one is outputting into that chemical infuser. That one is pointing into that chemical infuser. So if we click on, well, I guess we click on here, this is the chemical oxidizer that's taking sulfur dust and turning things into that. Now we have lots and lots of sulfur. We've been getting sulfur for like ever since we started sifting, and all we have to do with that sulfur here is just grind it up in a crusher to make the stuff. So we're just taking all that stuff we've had forever and ever and ever, and we're putting it in a chemical infuser, and it's making sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid and oxygen are then being pumped into this chemical infuser to make sulfur trioxide. So oxygen, sulfur dioxide, you add an oxygen to it, it's now trioxide. that's kind of how it works, I guess. Whatever. Sulfur trioxide is then being pumped or forced next door into this chemical infuser where it's being mixed with water vapor and sulfur trioxide to make sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid is then being moved in here to a chemical dissolution chamber with the fluorite, and the fluorite is being mixed to make hydrofluoric acid. That is moved next door into this chemical infuser, which is currently off. Turn it on so that it can start making uranium, whatever the heck this stuff is. Uranium hexafluoride. Uranium hexafluoride is then going to again be pumped into a isotopic centrifuge ever so slowly here, where it's then going to be turned into the stuff that we care about, or fissile fuel, which I'm going to store, hopefully, if this will work, back. There we go. All right, and then that is going to then shove that into a quantum entangloporter, because this is the only way to move chemicals, or I should say gases, from one world to another. So push that down. All right, so that should be dumping that in here, and it hopefully not making too much of a mess out of all of it. So I went ahead and set one of these up so that it can okay, so now we're storing 2 buckets of fissile fuel in this quantum entangloporter. This is an incredibly slow process, and it's one of those times where we're probably going to spend a little bit of time maybe upgrading some of this stuff. And of course, applied energistics. Oh, I need to where's my crafting card? Crafting card. I need to make sure I do that. Crafting card. Thank you very much. You need to make sure you have crafting cards so that you can do all of the stuff that you need to do in there, and then we should be okay. Now, the biggest thing I think I'm going to have to worry about right now is that we don't have a massive amount of that stuff. So, fluorite. Fluorite is going to be one of those, I don't know whether we can process this to make it better or worse or what. I mean, it might be worth running it through the chance to do something else. I'm going to have to go turn the grids back on, or the things back on, to get them to start doing the work. And we may end up having to do a fluorite B or something like that, or whatever. How much of a pain in the butt is it to do the fluorite B? What do you want? I got to give you a fluorite ore, or a fluorite block, to a diamond B to make a fluorite B, and how often is that going to make me something? 50% chance. It might be worth our time to do that. I think for right now what I'll do is just go up here and push the button on that, and then we can let that run for a while and push a little bit more stuff. Again, we don't need come on, downstairs. We don't need a lot of things. Well, we need a lot of things. We're going to need enough stuff here to make this function reasonably well. So let's take this to the nether and plumb this in. And so this is going to be our fluid input, or I should say fluid input, our gaseous input. So we'll put that right here, and I want to say that the back on this gas is going to be that. And go. I don't like these things. They're such a pain in the butt. Give me, what are you, gas? Figure 8 fluids, gases. There you go. Now, I don't want input. I want output. There you go. And then we're filling up full of fissile fuel. All right. So once this fills up, we can turn this on and do a little bit of goofing around with the, wherever the settings are. I think it's in here. We have to change the burn rate so that this can do what it needs to do. Again, I could make a big ugly thing. The problem is I don't rightly see how I can immediately void the steam unless we plug it into like a chemical tank, and then possibly just have that chemical tank do what it needs to do. We can go grab one of those really quickly. I know it's kind of silly because we'll end up with this big gigantic reactor or big gigantic turbine that we can build, or big gigantic turbine. It's actually not all that big, the one that we can build that'll run off that thing. One more little thing before I end the day, and then we work on to the next thing, which is going to be lighting that thing up and probably doing a little bit of goofiness. Can I just void this in here? I can. So theoretically, we could just dump steam straight into the void using a basic chemical tank with that thing once it builds enough fuel. So I think for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to probably call it right here. I don't know how long this episode is. I've been kind of working on it for a while. This took way too long, and again, I need to kind of tune and prune on it to get it a little bit faster than it currently is, because, well, this is kind of slow, and I think this thing can take speed and energy upgrades, and we have plenty of energy to kind of play with right now. So I want to kind of just make sure that this is cranking as good as I can get it to go, because again, in order to make anything out of anything, we need nuclear waste. This stuff right here, we need that. And in order to make this, like say the polonium or the plutonium, in order to turn this next quest in for the end power at the end over here, we need 5 of those. 5 of those is well, 10, well, it should say 5 buckets of plutonium and some fluorite dust. That is going to require, if we look at it here, it's 1 millibucket per 10 millibuckets here. That'll be, yeah, we're going to need a fair amount of that stuff to be able to turn these in. Now, some of the interesting next steps in here, I think, for us in Mechanism, I don't know if I'm going to go this far. We have to do this. We have to do the next step. We have to be able to do the stuff that is making antimatter pellets, antimatter, which is polonium inside a superficial phase shift structure. This thing is huge. I've already looked at it. It's crazy. So that's one way of taking this and getting rid of your readily radioactive stuff from that thing. So plus it's a way of making the polonium pellets, which we can make all kinds of other silly fun things in this pack, to include whatever that is. And digging through some stuff, but yeah, like the mecha suit, we can build the mecha suit, we can build some upgrades for things and stuff, plus the gear, plus the jetpacks, plus the things. All these, as far as I know, plug into the jetpack or into that suit that allows us to do all kinds of fun, cool little things like tools and whatever. It's what I would probably say is going to be the top tier armor in this pack, and whether or not we're going to make it is just, I don't know. It's kind of one of those, if we get bored, we'll do it, but we're going to be forced to do a few things. As far as fusion, we're going to have to create the power for it, so, or at least the fuel. Good, that's working reasonably well now. We're going to at least have to create the fuel for it, so we'll see as to where we go at the end of that. So I think for right now, I'm going to click the button, go over here and wait for this thing to kind of fill up. I'm going to have to chunk load this area, which I think I can do with this, right? I forget. Can we chunk load with these things? I know I've got a chunk loader out here anyway. We can do it from here. And yeah, I need to, no, not that. This. We'll just do that all the way out, and then I think that's how you do it. Whatever. Anyhow, we'll let this fill up, do what it needs to do. Once we get a little bit of stuff in here, we'll turn this on and then figure out what in the heck we're going to do with it, because I have to put up a whole bunch of these down somewhere so that we can process them. But we're going to have to, the next step, I hate to say it, the next step is going to be us producing plastic so that we can make the thing to be able to process this, the solar neutron activator, which is going to be fun because I don't know if that's going to work in the nether or not, but we'll find out. So anyhow, I just wanted to make sure that the thing that could blow up is in the nether, and the thing that we may or may not need to worry about that's going to leak nasty stuff all over the place may either be here or somewhere else. But we do have access to the ability to move things back and forth, and we'll go from there. So till then, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.